Welcome to Excel Data Entry Forms. In this class, we will learn how to collect data and enter into forms using Office 365 tools, as well as how to use forms on local files to make data entry more efficient. Examples in this class will be done using an A1 academic license for Office 365 or Excel 2016 locally installed. Unfortunately, use of the Forms tools requires a work or school license for Office 365. With that, let's begin. The easiest and most effective forms tools we have available will be using Office 365. The purpose of this form is to collect data to fill a spreadsheet. Once the form is created, it can be sent to anyone and they can respond using either a web browser or a mobile phone. No knowledge of Excel required. Crucially, you are not giving them the ability to change your Excel spreadsheet in any way, and you have the ability to apply some restrictions to the data provided if you want using validation tools similar to those in Excel. To begin, log into your Office 365 account, as you can see I have here. Go to the Excel app and create a new blank workbook. If you have used Forms before or are just aware of the app and you're wondering why we aren't doing that, the reason is this method automatically ties the form to the Excel file, making it much easier to create. Once you are in the new workbook, you can name the file and then go to Insert Forms. So I will change this from Book 3 to Materials Request. And then go to Insert Forms. Notice that pull-down arrow. We'll come back to that later on. From this, I choose New Form, and that has created the form linked to the worksheet. You see the name is automatically the same as the Excel workbook that you have created before. Now, we are ready to start editing the form. If we wanted to change the name, we could do so, clicking in here and giving it a name and/or a subtitle. In my example today, we're going to be adding questions for a form to request materials for the library. To do this, we're going to add questions. I can click any outside of the space I've created once I'm done with that and click Add New Question. You can see the question types that are available here, including the pull-down arrow that has some of the less popular ones as well. Notice the section option here. If you want, you can create multiple sections in your form. If you've ever filled out an online form and after a few questions clicked Next to go to the next page, that's what was happening. You were going to another section of the form. We will do an experiment with that later on. Let's create an example for all of these. First, I'm going to select Choice, and I'm going to put in the question name. What format is the material you are requesting? Notice as I type this in, we have automated options put in here below. We can change what those say. So I click on that, and I'll say Book, DVD. I'm going to add another option here. And I could continue adding options, but we also have the choice to add an other option. And I would do that. Of course, you've probably seen on surveys before where you had the other radio button that you could select and then you could fill in what you wanted. That's what you're getting when you add that choice. Now I could continue editing this or adding more information, but for now we're going to add some more questions. I'm going to add another question and another choice. What kind of audiobook? And we can have the choice CD or streaming. You might be wondering, why would you have this question if people are selecting book or DVD? We'll come back to that later with some of the more advanced options that we have. Now let's add some more choices for this. Let's try the text option. What is the name of the item requested? You see underneath here for the space to enter the answer, if you were expecting a longer response, say you were asking for suggestions and you wanted them to be able to write something memo length, you could select long answer here. If not, you can simply leave that blank. We will come back to look at some of these other options later on as we progress. Let's add another option here. I'm going to put in the date. We'll come back to rating later on. I wanted to create an example of entering the date into this form. We will see that a little bit later on, so I put in that question. I'm going to add another one here. Let's take a look at the pull down. You can see ranking, and you can see how much you like. It says like RT, that's for like rating. You can see file upload. I'm going to skip that one for this example, but if you had a survey that requested people to upload an image or a PDF file or any other kind of information that you might need, that could be a relevant choice. For a good example of this, you can look at our website and take a look at the 3D print request, where we allow people to upload the file that they want. That's something that could use this file upload feature. And then finally, the Net Promoter Score. We'll create an example for each of these, but for right now, I'm going to do the ranking one. And I'll say, put available formats in order of preference. Okay, now we're going to keep adding more features. I just want to show you how all of these work. And I'm going to add a section so that when we test this, we'll have multiple pages. When you create a section, you can give it a name. And because we're just having fun here and doing an example, I'm going to call this section Useless Questions, because a lot of the ones that we're going to do for the rest of this don't really apply to this survey example, but we're going to throw them in anyway. Now I'm going to add a new one here. I'm going to put in a rating. We've all seen ratings on forms that we filled out in the past. You can have up to 10 stars if you want, as few as 2, if you just want it to be good or bad. 5 is the standard, and you can change the symbol from stars to numbers, however you like that to work. Other ones we haven't looked at yet, we can do the like rating. Now notice with this, you have a lot to fill in. You have the options that you are comparing and judgment methods for them here across the top. So I'm going to say, asking librarian for help, or using this form. Of course, if you wanted to add more lines to this, you could add another statement here. And as I go across here, let's say, hate it. And I'll finally put in the Net Promoter Score. We've all seen these before. How likely are you to recommend us after we finish something up or we get to the end of a survey? We can throw that in there if you like. Now, we've added in all of our questions, and I want to go over some of the special features that are available for this. In particular, I'm going to go back up to the top here, and when you highlight any question, let's look at some of the options that we have here. First off, we have Copy Question. So if you wanted a duplicate of this with slightly different options, you can create a copy of it right away. Next to that, we have the trash bucket if you decide you want to delete this question because it's no longer appropriate. And next to that, you have the up and down arrows if you wanted to rearrange the questions in your survey. So I can move that down and say, you know what? Nope, that goes right back up. Underneath here, we have a couple of other choices. Now, this one is only available for the choice question option. You have the ability to turn on multiple answers. We've all probably seen this on forms before as well. Typically, you have the radio buttons, which are the circles that only allow you to choose one. But if you turn on multiple answers, they become the check boxes where you can have more than one thing if you want. So we can go with that if you were inclined, or we can leave it as the forced choice, only select one of the radio buttons. Next to that, we have the required option. If I turn that on, that means you have to fill in this question or you cannot submit the form. You don't want to overuse this. You only want to have it when appropriate, otherwise the form can have some problems. Now if I scroll down a little bit, I could say, well, we definitely need the name of the item, so I want to make that required as well. Otherwise, I'm going to leave them not required, and let people just fill in what they want when appropriate. In the little ... that we have here, there are a few other choices. Shuffle options is available for the choice kind of questions. That allows you to move around these at random if you didn't want to have any of your preferences in putting them in affect the answers. And the drop-down changes this to a drop-down menu instead of radio buttons underneath if you're looking to save space. What I want to show you here is adding branching. What this allows us to do is have different survey questions asked based on the information that's put in. So you can create multiple paths that the form can take based on the results. For example, in this case, if a responder says they want an audiobook, the survey is going to ask them what kind of audiobook they would like. Otherwise, it's going to jump to the next question. Using branching properly can create very elaborate surveys with multiple options, but you need to be careful and keep careful track of how it works, or you could end up asking questions that don't make sense based on the answers given. It's also important to note that once you include branching, the form will no longer calculate expected completion time for you. So now I'll show you how this works. When I add branching, for each possible answer, it asks where should you go. By default, they go to the next question. But I want to change this to, for a book, it's going to skip audiobook and go to name of the item requested. Same thing for DVD and for other. Only for the audiobook do I want to go to what kind of audiobook. For everything else, we are skipping that question. That's the idea of the branching. It allows you to move around through this. Now, one more thing that I want to show you, and for that I'm going to add one more question down here. So I'm going to go back from the branching options up here at the top, and down to the bottom I'm going to add a question, and I'm going to choose text and say, how many of the items should we buy? And for this, I'm going to again go to the ... and choose restrictions. So when you have just a text field that they can enter things into, you have the option to put in some rules for what they can enter in. The restrictions only include a kind of number. Note that there aren't as many options available as you might expect if you used data validation in the past. That's a tool that is often used with formulas and with inputs in desktop versions of Excel. Office 365 provides a lot of versatile tools, but it's not unusual for there to be fewer options than in the desktop version of the program. So this is one of those cases. You can say simply, I want a number entered in, or you can be more specific, and you can say it has to be bigger than a certain number, it has to be greater than or equal to something, so you can set a range, it has to be less than a certain number, or less than or equal. In this case, I'm going to say it has to be greater than or equal to 1. But if maybe you get bulk discounts for things that you sell, you can say it has to be greater than or equal to 10 or 25 or whatever you want it to be. But we're going to stick with 1. Now with that, we have entered in all of the questions that I want for this survey. So let's take a look at the settings. We would get to that up in the upper right-hand corner here, and click the ... and go to Settings. A couple of key things with this. This is where you can control who can respond to your form. If you want anyone to be able to, select that radio button at the top, so anyone can respond. If it's intended to be internal for your organization, you can leave it at only people in my organization can respond. Either way, be aware that anyone who fills in this form while logged in will automatically have their name and email information included in the form if they are part of your organization. It grabs that from the login in the browser that they are attached to, or the phone if the phone is logged into their account. This setting is also where you can control whether or not you are accepting responses, down here under Options for Responses. Perhaps setting a time frame during which people can submit answers. You can set a start date and an end date if you like. Or you can simply accept responses. You can also customize a thank you message here. The default is, of course, saying your response was submitted, but you can change that to whatever you want. Finally, you can choose whether or not to receive email notifications for each response. There are, of course, positives and negatives of receiving a notification for each response. If this is a small scale, you might want to be aware that your survey is being received and people are entering in information. If this is going out to a large number of people, you might not want to receive an email for every single one. Finally, the theme option allows you to change the appearance of your form. This does not affect its functionality at all, but it can make your work stand out. And you see I simply click on whichever theme I like, and it changes the coloring in the background. Now, once you have entered in your questions and edited them how you like, it's time to preview the form. This is where you would typically see a time estimate for the form, and it's a good idea to take the time to check both the mobile and the PC versions to see how it looks. Be sure to test your branching options thoroughly. So when I go to Preview, knowing that the branching is different for the audiobook, I am going to test that one. Just like that, and you can see what kind of audiobook pops up, so that worked as intended. I will now choose the name of the item requested. For the date, you can either type it in or select a day. When I went to the next section, this is where we had the next button there. So that jumps me to here. I'm going through and entering information in so that we can take a look at the response and how this works. If I enter in something incorrect into this restricted form, you see it appears in red and it's giving me the instructions for what I'm supposed to do. Of course, it wants an actual number, not simply typing in the word for a number. Once I have done that, I can click Submit. So that was testing out and previewing our form. Looked like everything worked as intended, so we're ready to go. We are ready now to collect our responses. To do this, we use the Collect Responses button in the upper right, previously Share. With this, you can get a URL address that can be sent directly to people or posted online by simply copying this. Or I can go to an email tool, allowing me to send an email, or a QR code that I can download and then include in any publications that I have. Or finally, an embedded bit of data that I can copy and paste into my website, and then people would be able to view the form there. For the purposes of this example, I'm simply going to copy this form, and we will go to that page. Now, of course, typically, you would not enter the form for your own data entry. You do this to collect responses from other people, but just so we can see the response, I'm going to go through this again. And I am quickly filling this out. Whoops. I'll go back a little bit and select a day there. I will continue through this. And I have submitted my form. Now that we have some data entered in, it's time to go back and take a look at the Excel form, that workbook that we had created earlier. Now take a look. At the bottom, it has created something called Form 1 that was not there before, and it has made this table with all of the information. You see it put in the start time and the completion time for this. It automatically put in an ID number for each entry that was created here. And because I was not logged into my name with the tab that I entered these in, it kept it anonymous. Then we get into the format of the material. I selected audiobook. You can see the first time I did streaming, the second time CD. Name of the item. Date that I selected there. How happy am I with this? I had skipped over the ordering the formats, so that response was empty. How happy am I with the form? And you can see all of the information entered in. So we didn't need to do anything to link it. That was automatically created by going through this. With this, hopefully you can see how easily you can collect data from outside sources and with it go straight to an accessible Excel form. It's also important to note that within the Excel file, I can go back to Insert, and in the pull-down menu underneath Forms, I can return to the Preview, Edit, Send, or delete the form that I've created. This can be helpful if you have a lot of similarly named forms within your Office 365 account. That way you can be sure you're grabbing the right one when you want to make edits. But what if you don't have an Office 365 account, or you just want a more efficient way to edit information on your own Excel workbooks? There's a form tool for that too. To use the data entry form in Excel, first create the outline of your Excel spreadsheet, as you can see I've done here. Create the field categories and perhaps put a row or two of data in, or go to an existing spreadsheet that you want to be able to edit quickly. We're going to use the Forms tool to edit this information, but there are a couple things we need to do first. Problem number one is that the Forms tool is not in the ribbon, so we need to either add it to a customized section of the ribbon, as you can see I've done here, or add it to your Quick Launch bar, as I will demonstrate. As you can see, I right-click on the Quick Launch and choose to customize it. If you have not used the Quick Launch before, it is in the upper left-hand corner of any Office programs from 2007 on. Typically, it's where you would use the Undo button or the Save, but you can add other convenient things like printing or functions that you like to use there. After I've right-clicked on it, I choose Customize Quick Access Toolbar, and this pops open. Now in the pull-down menu here, change it from Popular Commands to Commands Not in the Ribbon, and then scroll down until you find Forms. They are listed alphabetically here. There's Form, and I add it. And once I say OK, you now see the Form button in the upper left. Problem number one is solved. Problem two is that for the Form tool to work, your data needs to be in a table. If you don't typically use tables, where you would find it is in the Home, Styles, and Format as Table. You can choose whatever layout you like there, or if you want to be efficient with it, you can click anywhere in the data and simply press Ctrl+T. Excel will always guess at the data range. It's typically correct, but it's worth making sure that it gets this right here. In this case, it did, A1 through G4. Note that it has the checkbox for My Data Has Headers. Once I click OK on this, it has formatted it as a table, and a new option has appeared on the ribbon here with Table Tools and Design Choices. Look through here and see if header row is appropriate. If you want the banded rows, you can uncheck that to see how it looks. The filter buttons are the arrows that you see appearing next to each name. And of course, there are different styles that you can choose depending on how you want this to look. Now that we've made this into a table and added the Form tool button to an accessible part of our screen, we're ready to go. Simply highlight any cell in the table and then left-click the Form tool, and a pop-up will appear with each record listed vertically. Information can be edited, searched, added, and deleted using this tool. A few quick tips. Use the Tab and the Enter keys to speed up data entry. Enter is particularly useful when there are fields you can skip over. When entering a date, you can use Control plus the semicolon to enter today's date without having to type anything in. And when you search for a certain type of data using the Criteria tool, it will look as if there are more results than there are because it still lists the total number of fields. But when you simply use the Previous and Next buttons, you will see that it's only going through things that match the criteria choices. This tool is particularly helpful for forms that have a large number of fields. If you have a form that goes several fields wide here and you have to scroll side to side to get to all the information, that can be difficult to read and difficult to edit. This, by making everything vertical for each entry, allows you to see the entire row entry at once and handle it and edit it much easier. Let me do a quick demo here of how you would move through the next or the previous ones. If you wanted to create new data, you would click New, and I can type in, and you see I use the Tab button to move through that, but now if I press the Enter key, it simply jumps on to the next one, and you can see it entered in that information without worrying about the rest of it. I can put in another name, and I could keep entering information, or I can press Enter, and it fills that in as well. Now, when I want to test the criteria, I would put in a search object, such as Smith for the last name, and when I press Enter, I can see the only 2 appear here. Even though it says 4 of 5 and 1 of 5, that is telling me where it is listed in the total number of rows, not how many results there are. As I go through the next and the previous, you can only see those. You may have heard the tones that come up. If you try to go beyond what's there, that tone is indicating the end of the information. Whenever you're done, you can close this pop-up window by clicking the close. It can always be brought back by clicking on the Forms button again, and the changes are retained in the actual table, so there's no need to save it when you're there. You simply come back here, press the Forms button again, and you're using this tool once again. When you're done, you would save this as you would any changes that you made in a local Excel files. I hope you found both these versions of data entry forms helpful. Thanks again for joining our class.